But yes, I'm Jeff Beaton. I'm the Chief Enrollment Manager. Like I said, it's a fancy term for Dean of Admission or Dean of Enrollment. I've been with the school now for 11 years. I've been in the admission office the whole time. This is my 5th year overseeing all admission and enrollment for the school. I consider myself very, very lucky and privileged to work at a school like Choate, I will say. I'm a product of boarding school myself. I only went to boarding school for 1 year, though. So I did a postgraduate year. I went to a day school for 4 years for high school, and then ended up doing 1 year at a boarding school. I say that because I regret not going earlier. So if you are thinking right now, should I do it now? Should I go later? I'm scared to across the world. I will tell you this, it is worth it. I remember calling my parents after about 3 weeks into my experience and said, why didn't you allow me to do this earlier? And my parents said, because we hid it from you. And I was like, that's not good. So if you're a parent in this room and you have a kid sitting next to you that really wants to do this, listen to them. That's my first piece of advice, is listen to them. They know what they want, even when they're only 13 and 14 years old. And if they light up when they think about boarding school and the experiences that you can have, and you've been hearing about the experiences throughout today, I'm sure there's other sessions you've been heard about all the opportunities. Will it be challenging? Of course. Does it mean flying across the world? It does. But when your kid calls home and is lighting up about their incredible experience, you know that you've done the right thing as a parent, as hard as it might be. I don't think any parent in this room wakes up in the morning and says, yes, I want my 14-year-old going away from home earlier, right? But you do it because you want to see your child happy and you want to see them successful. So I start there because I really am a believer of what these schools can do. They really are transformative experiences. So I'm going to talk for a little bit. As you know, any admission person, we can talk and talk and talk. I want to make sure you have chances to obviously visit the other schools. There are incredible schools out there, different sizes and locations and what they offer. So don't just go to a couple of tables. Try to hit as many as possible, because you're going to find out some really cool things about what they might do a little bit differently and unique. You will never hear me, at least, say that we are better than another school. That's first and foremost. I actually don't believe in that. I believe that there's differences in schools, that there are unique aspects of schools, and you need to make sure that what works for you is the most important thing. Where can you align yourself? So my talk today is, what do we look for in an application? So I'm actually going to do that first, but I am going to flip it a little bit, and I'm going to say, what should you be looking for as well? So what are we looking for as the admission offices at all these incredible schools? But also, what should you be thinking about as you go back to the tables today, as you go home, for the weekend, and think about what are you excited about for boarding school? So what do we look for? I'm trying to do this at a 30,000 foot level, right? What Choate might look for might be a little bit different than maybe some other schools might be looking for. But at the heart of boarding school, I would say there are certain aspects that are going to be consistent amongst all of us, whether it's a small school, large school, a US school, a non-US school. The first and foremost thing is you have to have, this is very, very basic, but you have to be a student that loves to learn. Like, truly. You have to be someone that is getting up in the morning and saying, I'm excited to go to school. I'm excited to learn something new. I'm curious, and I want more out of my education, right? Now, obviously, there's some days where you're like, oh my gosh, it's 6 a.m., I'm off to school, like I'm not that excited for math class at 8 a.m. Of course there are. But you really need to have innately in you that true curiosity and a true love of learning. And not just the love of learning for the grade, not just a love of learning for your time at a boarding school, but what we really emphasize is lifelong learning. That your learning at a place like Choate is going to be, yes, in the classroom, but it's going to be actually more outside the classroom. What happens in the dormitories? What happens in the dining hall? But then it's also preparing our students to be lifelong learners post-college and as an adult. Not trying to age any student in this room. You're all pretty young. The real world's a long way away, but we're trying to prepare you for that. So love of learning and curiosity is huge. I think a big thing this is my little tidbit, by the way, that I look for in my applications. We always concentrate only on the academic piece. The SSAT, the grades, the transcripts, the teacher recommendations. Those are all important pieces of a holistic application. But don't forget about how you're going to engage at any of these boarding schools. These boarding schools are so much more than just the 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock academic day. It's about activities. It's about engaging in sports, in arts, in community service, engaging with your classmates. That's where the learning comes in. So as you think about this process, don't forget about what you do currently in your own community. How do you engage in your own school? How do you engage in your own community? How do you give back to your community? Do you have an interest in arts? Maybe it's multiple arts. Do you have an interest in sports? Maybe you have interest in both. The great thing about boarding school is you can do both of those things within the same day. There's no traffic on our school campuses, right? You can get in a lot more because everything is at your fingertips. But don't forget that in order to be successful in this process, you have to talk about those things. So in your interview, in your essays, how are you going to engage on our campuses? And specifically, how are you going to engage at the school that you're applying to? Right? Because what Choate offers might be different than the Kate School in California, might be different than Miss Porter's school in Connecticut, might be different than the Hotchkiss School, right? There are different types of schools. How are you going to engage specifically in the programs of Choate Rosemary Hall or elsewhere else you're going to apply for? Because we're all a little bit different. Authenticity is important, right? As you go to the different tables, what makes you tick? What makes you interested? What makes you passionate, but doing that in an authentic way? No one in this room, including Mr. Beaton, I am far from this, is perfect. No one, right? So you need to make sure that you're your authentic self, right? And that comes in all ways. In an interview, you're not trying, you're just trying to have a conversation in an interview, right? With your essays, I know what 13-year-old writing looks like. I've been doing this for 11 years. None of you are ready to write for the New York Times. I will say that. And that's okay. We're not looking for that. We're not looking for the best novelists in the world. What we're looking for is your voice. What we're looking for is your authenticity and how you're describing yourself and why you're excited for boarding school. So yes, of course, have your essays be looked at from your peers or from your parents, but don't have it overly looked at. We will tell the difference between someone that has really done this on their own and is authentic in their voice versus has that essay been really revamped 10, 20 times, right? So think about that authenticity in how you're presenting yourself in an interview, but also how you're writing about yourself, because those are really important pieces of the application. This is a big one. You have to have a willingness to step outside your comfort zone. I actually think that by sitting here right now, you're stepping outside your comfort zone. Even considering boarding school across the world is stepping outside your comfort zone. So kudos to all of you for even considering this, but don't stop there. Once you are on our campuses, do not be afraid to try new things. I'm sure all students in this room have deep passions in something right now, and that's great. But that's not going to define you for the rest of your life. It might. And when you get to one of our schools, you might continue to work on that passion and go deeper in that area. But don't let that hinder what else is out there, right? Our schools, all of our schools offer so many opportunities. It's even hard to count at a lot of these schools, but don't limit yourself. So if you're sitting here right now and being like, oh, I love my English class and I can see myself, doing as many humanities classes as possible, do that. But don't be afraid to take that high-level robotics class, even though you've never done it before, because you never know what your new strengths will be until you actually do it. So don't be afraid of a challenge. Step outside your comfort zone in all ways at these boarding schools. The great thing about our schools, though, at every boarding school, you're going to have people in your corner that are going to push you to do that too. You're never doing this alone. I think it's actually funny when people say, I always ask, why are you interested in boarding school? And I'm sure a lot of people say, independence and freedom, right? That is true. You will have independence. But let me tell you, there are more eyes and ears on you than ever before. There are 130 faculty members that live on my campus alone, in the dorms, on the campus. it's hard to hide. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that is that we're going to be there to support you. Just like your wonderful parents sitting next to you want to support you, right? We understand that this is a big step for parents, a huge step actually. And we take that very, very seriously, is the care and support of your child, right? So know that, yeah, there is going to be independence, but like this is not college yet, so watch out. Okay, so next, my iPad, here we go. You probably have heard from all these schools today that we're very diverse places. And I mean diversity in all ways, truly, like lived experiences, backgrounds, perspectives. What all of you have come here, you're in Singapore right now, how you have been raised, how you have seen the world is going to be completely different than some that's coming from San Francisco, California. That's coming from Dubai. That's coming from Florida. That's coming from Colombia. Right? At a school like Choate, we have kids from truly 55 countries, 40 different states. I mean, we are global places. These boarding schools are global places. That's all well and good, but are you willing and have an appreciation for difference? Because these campuses are places of difference. So can you be respectful of people's backgrounds? Can you be compassionate for people that might think and respond differently? Our schools are all about, can you be a good listener? Right? We can all talk a lot, especially Mr. Beaton, but can you actually listen and understand and have an open mind to someone's perspective and background that's gonna be very different from yours? But how cool is that to do it at age 14 and 15 and 16 and 17? Most students don't get that opportunity until much later in life. The world is diverse. We have to prepare you for that. You get to do it in a safe and comfort place, like a place like Choate or any of these boarding schools, to take advantage of. But you have to have that willingness to appreciate diversity and difference, because that's what our schools are all about. I'm almost on this section, I promise you. Resiliency. These places will challenge you. I will say that these places are rigorous, they're hard. We want to prepare you, right? Like, you ask any of these graduates, usually their first year of college is much easier, right? It really is. And that's not to scare you, it just means that there are going to be times of challenge. That is the real world, though. We're preparing you for the real world. There's going to be the support systems for you to get through those challenges, but are you resilient to get through those tough times? And whether that's academically, socially, right? Maybe a little bit of homesickness, maybe a argument with your roommate, that could happen. You never know, right? We're putting you with a roommate. That's going to be very different from you. There's going to be moments that you have to be resilient and reminding yourself as to why I did this for students in the room. So I say that because it really has to be student-driven. Because when those tough times come, if you are that student, you can remind yourself, but I chose this place, right? I chose this experience. I wanted that. That's gonna get through the challenge. That's gonna make sure you have that resiliency. If it's your wonderful mom or dad sitting next to you that's forced you here today, that's not gonna work. I must be completely and utterly honest. Now, maybe they forced you here today and then you're like, wow, this is actually pretty incredible. And then you go forward and then it's your process. That's one thing. But if you are dragging those feet on Singapore Airlines all the way to Wallingford, Connecticut, not a good sign, right? You really have to be the ones to do this, to get through that. So that's what we look for. I'm going to flip it quickly, and I'll have some chances for a question and answer. What should you all be looking for, right? There's 40-something schools out there. They're all saying wonderful things to you, I'm sure. We're pretty nice people, and we all offer some pretty great things, but every school is different, and every kid is different. So what should you be thinking about as you leave today, as you go through this process? An important part, my first thing I talked about was a passion for learning. There has to be that academic alignment. You have to know, okay, what kind of curriculum am I looking for? What kind of teaching and learning style am I looking for? Some schools do one way of teaching. Other schools do many different ways of teaching. What works best for you? Are you excited by collaboration and discussion-based learning, or do you thrive off of lecture-based learning? Are you excited for classes that can really be real-world applicable, or are you really more interested in memorization and test taking? Are you excited by group projects, or are you excited more by individual tests and papers? Ask the schools, what is their philosophy on teaching and learning? What we do at Choate is going to be different than some other schools, but you have to know what you want to do in order to be aligned with the school, what they offer. What do the schools offer academically that might be of interest to you, right? If you love robotics right now, you probably want to see if the school has robotics, right? That's probably a really big thing for you. So you have to think about what are the opportunities that the school offer academically, what are the resources that they have in order to make sure that you are feeling challenged and feeling supported in all those ways. What specialized programs do the different schools have? Every school has different specializations. Do those fit your current interest? Or do any of those pique your interest, right? You might not have any idea that you want to do sustainability, but because you heard it from a school today, maybe that piqued your interest. And maybe you're going to do some more research on that school to find out, is this a right fit for me academically? How does size of school, how does location of school play a role in what your experience is going to look like, right? A place like Choate, we're a large school. We're 860 students. We're in the middle of a town. For some people, that's really exciting. For others, they're like, town? Like, I need to be in the middle of nowhere, right? So you have to think about how is size and location of school going to impact your experience? And they will. And every school is going to have their answer. What does residential life look like? You should be asking that question at the table. How does advising programs work? Do freshmen live together with sophomores, juniors, and seniors? Or is it freshman-only housing? How does that play a role in what your experience is going to look like? So there's all these things that as you start to think about how I'm going to align and be the best fit possible for the school, that you should be asking for those questions. What are your interests and passions? Does that school have those things? If you love swimming, that school on the East Coast better have an indoor swimming pool, right? If you love violin, does that school have an orchestra, a string quartet? Do they have private music lessons? You have to be thinking about those things because that's going to play a role in, is this a good fit for me as well? And then community. What kind of vibe of school do you want, right? Think about, how does Saturday classes work? Do you want Saturday classes? Do you not want Saturday classes? Saturday class is a thing in the US boarding schools. We do not have them at Choate, but that plays a different role, right? So what does that mean? What does the schedule look like? How does the school schedule impact your learning? Really good question to ask the different schools. What does wellness program looking like? Mental health, support, for support in all ways. Yes, academically, but also when things get tough, and they will, right? Where does that support come into? What does that school do for you? So I say all these things because, yeah, it's important for us to say like what we are looking for, but we're only 50% of the equation on the admission side of things. The other 50% is you're driving this conversation. What do you want? And for kids in this room, what a cool opportunity, in my opinion, because I didn't have it at age 14 because my parents lied to me. You have the opportunity, probably, I'm going to go out on a limb here, that for the first time in your life, you have agency in what you want for your next educational journey. I'm sure a lot of you are sitting here right now at some wonderful schools here that your wonderful parents chose for you at like age 3 or age 4, right? Or you've moved around, but you never had a choice of where you got to go. Now you do, right? So now you actually get to think, what do I want? What do I don't want? What kind of vibe of school do I want? What kind of culture? And you're going to pick up on those things as you talk to people like me at the table, as you visit these different campuses. They all have their different flavor. They all have their way of doing things that are, again, going to impact how you see things. And then lastly, and then I'll leave some time for some questions. At the end of the day, in my opinion, and I hope it's for everyone's, it's about happiness and fulfillment. What school is truly going to be the place that you're going to be the most happy and fulfilled in all ways? And it takes time to figure that out as well. But success at one of these schools only happens when you feel the happiest, the most comfortable, and the most fulfilled, in all honesty. And I'm sure for parents in this room, when you had your wonderful kids back 13 or 14 years ago, and you thought to yourself, what do I want for my kid? Probably wasn't Choate Rosemary Hall. It was, I want them to be happy. I want them to be filled. I want them to be safe. I want them to succeed and be the best person that they can be, right? None of you said when they were born, I want my kid to go to Choate Rosemary Hall or any of those other schools, right? So that's how this process should work for you. It should be opportunities ahead of you. Find the place that's gonna be the best fit. Find the place that's gonna be the happiest for you. And I mean that for the students, right? It's great that mom loves the school. Mom's not living there. You are living there. You are crossing the world to do it. So it has to be from you as to what makes sense as a student. All right? I love this stuff, hope you can tell. But I'm happy to take any questions if they're out there. I think there's mics going around as well, maybe. If there's any questions. Maybe I scared all of you. Come on. Yes! There we go. You're into Choate. Here we go.
Thank you very much. The interesting speeches. And I really want to know what's the rat race like in your school.
Is the what?
Rat race. Thank you. The rat race.
Rat race?
Yes.
You mean competitiveness?
Yes, yes.
Here's what I love. I mean, I'm trying to keep this general, by the way. This isn't a Choate Info Mason session. If you want to come to the Choate Info session, January we'll be back in Singapore. But I would say from the 30,000-foot level at all these schools, whether they are a Choate or anywhere in between, at the heart of what we are is that kids have goals. All of you kids have goals. With that comes a little bit of competitiveness with themselves, in my opinion, but it's never at someone else's expense. These schools have really changed when you think about that it's so much of what we do is about collaboration, right? That our kids are not afraid to help somebody else in homework because they're nervous about, well, if they do well, then I don't do well. That's not how it works at any of these boarding schools, right? Yeah, there's hard times, there's rigor, but hard and rigor doesn't mean competitive, in my opinion. So I think if you ask any of the schools out there today, it really is a place that, yeah, you're gonna work hard, but it's not gonna be competitive against their classmates. These kids, they like each other. They wanna see each other succeed. You know, we talk about peer pressure. Obviously, peer pressure is not a great thing. There's positive peer pressure at these schools that they don't wanna see their friends fail because they're living together. This is not, I go home at night, right? They are in the dining hall together. They're in the sports fields together. They are living together. And with that just comes an appreciation for each other. So hope that's helpful. Cool. Yes.
Sorry, because you just sorry. Hi, Jeffrey. So you just mentioned each school has its unique teaching philosophy.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering what the teaching philosophy of Choate. And because, my son personally, he's kind of like a interactive way of learning, and he likes discussion in the class. So that's my question. Thank you.
Come to my Choate event in January. I'm really trying to be fair there's a wonderful schools out there. This is not supposed to be about Choate. We don't do one style of teaching, I will say that. We are not a one-size-fits-all school. We believe in being a little bit more progressive in that way. But there's wonderful reasons for all the schools to do what they do. Again, it means what makes sense for your child and who they are right now and who they want to be in 4 years too. Sound good?
Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, student question, here we go.
What's the relationship with you guys in the town? So it's like, does the town like you guys? Do you like the town?
Yes, we have January is our admission reception for Choate Rosemary Hall. Yeah, we have a great relationship with our town. We are in the middle of our town. That's a huge selling point for us. We have restaurants, we have movie theaters, we have bowling alleys. We are able to go off campus in a very safe way. Obviously, we need to make sure we know where our kids are going. But we have 2 streets that run through us, right? We are not behind a gate. We are not in the mountains. We are a place that is going to take advantage of our town. It's a safe town. We're close to New Haven, but talk to me more at the fair table about our town. But yes, good relationship. Yes.
Thank you. Do you have a sense of how the background of the faculty at generally at a school? So the student body is very diverse, but what about the faculty?
That's a great question.
Yeah, when I went to it's mostly Americans.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. This has actually been a huge thing for all the US boarding schools, is that as we have become more diverse, that's great, but we need to make sure that there's a sense of belonging for our students. And one of the ways that we do that is to make sure our faculty are mirroring the diversity of our students. And that means in all ways, where they're coming from. So a lot of our schools have gotten more international teachers. We have gotten teachers from different backgrounds to make sure that those kids can have those connections where it's not just teachers from Connecticut.
And it's also the perspective from
A global perspective is really, really important. So that's been a huge, huge thing of all these boarding schools, is to make sure that our faculty are representative of the world and not just where those schools are coming from. A huge selling point for our schools. Yeah. Yeah.
You talked a bit about things that you look for in applicants as well as things for us to look for in schools, but
Yeah.
is there any red flags in either of those categories
Ooh.
that either you or we should keep an eye on?
Ooh, negatives.
Sorry.
Yeah, I like it. You know, a big thing, I mean, this sounds very basic, I know, but you have to have a maturity to do this. Now, granted, you're still 13 and 14. You're not going to be the most mature person ever, but do you have that maturity and confidence to live away from home at an earlier age, right? So that's something, if we don't see that, that is going to be a little bit of a negative. Now we know that kids can grow into that, right? Who you are right now in November of this year is going to be vastly different than who you are in September of next year when you start at one of these schools. So we do try our best, like, forecast, and we see in recommendations, even when we like admit kids in March and we see them for like a revisit day, it's like, first of all, you like grew like 5 inches and you're like way more mature than I saw you in my interview. So that is something that we do think about. I'm gonna go back to the parent relationship. If your parent is doing all the talking, not good, right? I love your parents. I love you all. They're not going to Choate, Rosemary Hall, or any of these boarding schools, right? So you have to be the one to drive this, and we're gonna see that in different instances, right? And then you have to remember character matters. We are building, these are not just schools. These are communities. And when these are communities of difference. We have to make sure that when I'm doing an interview or I'm reading applications, I'm picturing like, do I want you in the dorm? Are you gonna be a good roommate? Are you gonna be a kid that's actually going to be open and honest at a dining hall table, right? Like, if we're not seeing that from your teacher recommendations, right, that's gonna be an issue, because you can be the smartest kid in the world, but if you're not compassionate for somebody else, it's not gonna happen at any of these schools. So you really have to think about what we do in our process is being as holistic as possible. It's not just about one area of your life, it's about all areas of your life. Character, engagement, and academics. Helpful? Cool. You're very welcome. A good thank you. I like that. Good? Awesome. Cool.
Shall we give Jeff a round of